Wings Remastered is the love child of a Kickstarter campaign to remake one of the classic aerial combat games of the Amigo, made all the way back in 1990. The game back then was fun and difficult, but obviously limited in technology, most obvious in its pixelated graphics and especially frame rate. Still, it did what it could and gained a fond following, in no small part due to the story. So, when a Kickstarter came about to update the title for modern machines, it gained no small popularity, though perhaps not quite enough. I won't get into the drama which can be Kickstarter and all the things which may or may not have happened, as I'm here primarily to talk about a game. The question I'm really here to answer is, did the game turn out well? And frankly, no, it did not. Mind you, it can take a bit to grasp this. The title is presented well at a glance, plays functionally, and the music and narrative seem to fit wonderfully into the title. As you play on, however, especially on the higher difficulties, the issues with the game begin to seep out little by little. But let's back up a bit. Wings Remastered Edition begins in the midst of the First World War, early in 1916. And follows a fresh-faced young pilot who has recently joined Britain's 56th under Colonel Farah. He's thrown into the role as scribe to the squadron's journal, hence the narration throughout. And the narration here is great. The story introduces us to plenty of great characters and villains, bringing both joy and tragedy to each, as they each attempt to survive the horrors of war to varying degrees of success. Each mission brings with it a new narration, both for the days which have passed as well as for the pre-mission. And here's where our first set of issues crops up. See, the voiced narration isn't in all copies of the game. If you didn't get through Steam, then you don't get it. Why? No idea. No reason for it. Was in at one point for, say, the good old games version, now it's not. So, something to be aware of if you're looking to purchase this. Second, it's a tad petty and a tad maddening, but it's actually difficult to follow the timeline of the war because dates are never listed excepting when there are squadron casualties and arrivals. Also something which was strangely removed. Third, for some reason the narration often does not match the captions. I assume it was for the sake of political correctness in most cases, as often the narrator tones down some of the more likely to start internet fight phrases, which is a bit of a shame as nothing said is truly so vulgar, but also odd as the captions are kept intact. Fourth, there are semi-frequent glitches in the narration. In the Steam version, any narration which lasts more than a page will expand the text of the second page to be unreadable, and it kind of takes you out of the moment. There's also a point later in the game where the narration cuts out entirely for a part of a paragraph for seemingly no reason. Lastly, and most important, is the narration rarely matches the gameplay. Now I'll get into this more later, but what happens in a game rarely fits the tone of the narration. For instance, if you somehow manage to survive past the first year, you'll have shot down more planes than the game historically states the entirety of the British Air Force has managed. Frequently, the title will hype up enemy aces who will have a quarter or fewer the number of kills you have. And I don't expect the game to match exactly how my pilot is progressing, but the way the game is set up does little to match what's going on in the story. It's more than a little off-putting should you pay attention. Which, if you complete the game, you more than likely are because the gameplay here has severe issues. These aren't very noticeable at first. You begin the game and it does really feel just like a graphical upgrade to an old classic. After naming your pilot, you decide how to spend points on a few stats. Flying determines your maneuverability in the air. Shooting determines accuracy, range, how quickly your guns jam. Stamina is how many hits you can take, and mechanical is how your aircraft handles when you do take hits. The stats are basic and grow over time based on performance and missions, though there's very little noticeable difference. Flying never changes much, stamina doesn't scale well with enemy damage. Mechanical makes little difference as your plane generally either flies fine or is on fire, and shooting, well, shooting is interesting. See, range is fairly negligible, and weapon jams mean extremely little. They're easy to avoid, and you normally won't be shooting more than quick bursts in any case. So it's really all about accuracy. To begin the game, your fresh second lieutenant will shoot in a pretty wide spread. As they gain rank, this spread is narrowed more and more. Thing is, your aircraft doesn't have fine controls, so it's actually far easier to hit opponents with a less accurate gun. And since there's no damage bonus, this basically means your damage output will tend to lower as the game goes on. Which leads us to the actual flying. The game is separated into 3 basic missions with numerous sub-missions in each. Bombing missions give you a top-down view of primary target and usually some secondary targets which mean absolutely nothing. You navigate what to bomb, usually based on a photograph with circled targets or otherwise trains or U-boats, and must bomb all these targets to succeed, all the while dodging AA fire and later some very basic planes which cross the screen in a straight line. Pretty simple and easy as long as you can remember the photo. I might like to see more of these missions if there were more variety in what you're attacking, but with that said, these are secretly the most consistent missions in the game, as there's very little which is technically wrong with them. Only things of note are occasionally secondary targets are at the edge of the screen and out of range of your bombs. As well, it's unclear during train missions just what exactly counts as a train kill without spending half your ordnance to cover the entire thing. As well, during U-boat missions, it's a little disappointing we cannot damage cruisers, or even have objective beyond destroying a frankly stupid number of U-boats. Strafing runs have you in a sort of diagonal attack view, where you'll gun down the ground and try to eliminate the majority of some primary target, either train cars, trucks, or soldiers. Again, there are secondary targets, but they're meaningless. Anti-aircraft will try to shoot you down, and infantry will turn and shoot, but neither offers any real danger. I have never seen an aircraft go down in this mode. Strafing offers potential, but has numerous major issues which are easy to notice. For instance, your aircraft is limited by the screen to move, yet typically the road or track you follow is off-center, heavily restricting visibility and movement. As well, the scrolling speed is barely slower than your reverse speed, making it exceedingly difficult to destroy anything whichever gets behind your guns. Both these issues are manageable, if annoying, but neither touch on the potential game-breaking glitch of this next one. See, the most common strafing mission, especially later, is trench runs, trying to kill as many infantry as you can hidden away in trenches. To pass the mission, you must kill half of all infantry. Problem being, about half of all infantry is hidden in craters that your guns cannot hit for no reason, meaning these strafing missions are impossible. The issue with this being, enough failed missions gives you a reprimand, and enough reprimands removes your pilot as surely as if you had died. Completely unforgivable. Fortunately, reprimands are pretty easily avoided, only coming off numerous failed missions, shooting out a friendly, or destroying a medic tent or truck. In my game, with minimal effort, I received no reprimands. But the simple fact that there are frequent unwinnable missions due to a glitch which can have very real consequences makes this an unforgivable glitch. Finally, there comes the bread and butter of the game, the dogfights. Here's where the majority of the game difficulty and issues plays out, as well as most of the fun. This is also the only part of the game your stats come into play. At first, everything seems fine. You begin the game easy, outnumbering opponents with your allies and easily gunning down weak aircraft and the occasional balloon with the rare bomber attack missions, and more rarely the protect missions, to spice things up. Controls are as simple today as they were back in 1990. You climb, dive, and bank. No rudder, no throttle. More annoying is the extremely restrictive camera, which allows you to look straight forward into your iron sights, left, right, or back, none of which allows you much visibility and has massive blind spots. This is compensated for somewhat by your pilot's head, which looks at the nearest enemy, but this is worthless in a furball and doesn't help one of the main issues of the controls. You can't look up, which may not seem too big a deal until you realize the only way to turn is to bank, meaning it's impossible to see what you're turning into while you're turning. It's a bit annoying they couldn't update the game to come with rather basic mechanics, but I don't consider anything but the visibility too major a fault. This is a rather simple game in the end. The problem with that is the game is far, far too long to be so simple. 248 missions is nothing to sneeze at, and the difficulty won't start ramping up until 80 or so missions in, when the mechanics have begun to wear out their welcome. By this point, unfortunately, numerous other issues will have become very obvious. For example, the pre-mission narration always sets the scene with what you can expect in the mission, telling you who ambushed who, how many there are, what position they're in, etc. Yet every mission begins with two sides flying toward one another at equal altitude in randomized formation, meaning dogfights all quickly begin to feel exactly the same. But let me back up a bit to better explain the mechanics. I've spoken briefly about raising your stats and dying. As you complete missions, your stats improve. Dogfighting is where you can actually kill your character. During strafing and bombing runs, you'll just be too damaged and ditch. Take too many hits or run into another plane and your plane will catch fire and dive into the ground. Your pilot will be killed and you'll be given the opportunity to roll back and try the mission over or start a new character. The latter honestly makes little sense, what with the narration following a single character, but that's the basic gist of it. There's a possibility you can land your plane to ditch out, though this is nearly impossible in the midst of a dogfight, as the AI does not recognize a ditching pilot and will follow you down, guns blazing more often than not, and landing must be conducted extremely softly lest you crash and die. How easily all this occurs is based off difficulty. You have 3 levels, easy, normal, and hard, with a further option which highlights all targets to grant you far better visibility in the game. None of these options are difficult at any sort of technical level, and the extent of their difference is rather unfortunate. The damage you deal and the damage they deal. On easy, you'll take down most everything with a long burst and can tank massive damage. Nothing less than a mid-air collision will down you. On hard, it will take long seconds of sustained fire to down enemies, while a quick burst will damage you heavily, which means you'll spend a significant amount of the game with only one gun, as heavy damage destroys one of your weapons for the mission. Normal is, of course, the balanced option. It's unfortunate that the game resorts to simple damage percentages for difficulty, especially as this can make the late game for hard players feel extremely cheap. Still, no matter the difficulty, you can expect to die, often. See, the largest issue with the game, the one which arguably breaks it more than any other, and all others, is the AI. Wings Remastered has some of the most atrocious AI you will ever find in the game. The most obvious issue is neither allies nor enemies have any regard for collision. They will run straight into you without warning or care, like you don't exist. Which you kind of don't. Other planes cannot collide and will frequently be seen molded together, but should they so much as scratch by you, it's all over. Hence, your most common death most likely won't be by enemy guns or even planes, but your own allies. This might not be as large an issue if you could look up and down, but you can't. And the AI issues do not stop here. On top of collision issues, AI lacks any and all aggression to anything but you. Basically, enemies will shoot you and be passingly decent at it. They will not shoot much at your allies, and your allies will return the favor. Remember earlier when I said that if you survive the first year, you'll have more victories than the entirety of Britain? This is the reason why. The AI does not give you a choice. It is not uncommon to see multiple planes following an ally and either not shooting or, at best, shooting extremely minimally, and vice versa. It is actually exceedingly rare to find an ally shoot down an enemy, and far more so for an enemy to shoot down an ally. I believe the latter only happened 2 or 3 times in the course of my playthrough. This means you'll either kill everyone yourself or they will kill you. This fact compounds the idea that you are unable to retreat. You fight, you die, or you ditch, which, considering what I showed earlier, makes this something of a non-option. But we're not done. No. See, the AI comes with a few other nifty features. They can do a complete U-turn on the spot, but should you wind up behind an enemy, they will move in a more or less straight line until you either shoot them down, disengage, or their allies shoot you down. Which is necessary, frankly, considering the stupid number of shots it can take on anything but the easiest difficulty, not to mention lack of rudder controls to line yourself up properly. But then here's the kicker. Certain missions will have you protect a bomber. Your allies will follow the bomber in order to protect it. Enemies will follow you. Such missions are actually you against the enemy. Now, it's possible to get the enemy to engage other targets by basically flying way out of range, and this is how you'll more than likely survive most of the late game. However, here's the fun part. If the bomber your allies are following is attacked, they will not help. They will continue along their route as if nothing is happening. In other words, the AI is mind-numbing. They are completely unaware and non-aggressive, and most of the difficulty given to them is based on their cheating, by flying in ways you cannot and tanking absurd amounts of damage. Leave it to say that a couple hundred missions in, I was sick of the game. I stuck with it as a completionist who wished to see what became of the rather colorful characters the narration offered. But this is a title which is nothing less than unfinished. This all without getting into the glitches in the narration or the uselessness of anti-aircraft fire and dogfight missions. Can the game be fun? Sure. It can be enjoyable for what it is for a while. It has presentable graphics and sound, and the music is wonderful if not always suitable for the scene. But as it ramps up complexity in its missions, the mechanics don't keep up. If the game ended at mission 100, I'd call it a disappointing though altogether fun ride. It doesn't though. It goes on for 148 missions beyond that, and by the end I couldn't stand the game. With a more laid-back approach, perhaps you could enjoy the title all the way through, or if you're looking for a simple and easy dogfighter, you might garner some fun from the early stages of the game. To everyone else, this is not a title I'd recommend.